in this video I'm going to be focusing on the front pocket part of your blue jeans. So again, I'm using a Closet Case's skinny jeans, the ginger jeans. I love this pattern. So I'm going to focus on how to get your pockets really nice. This pair, I did some embroidery first. And I also, I added a little loop here, which kind of goes on later, because I like to put a carabiner of keys on my blue jeans, and I don't like hanging them where the loops normally go because they get in the way. So when you make your own jeans, you can make your own jeans, and you can do whatever you want. So the part I'm going to feature right now is this part right here. So we're going to pan over to the sewing machine, and I've labeled everything. Forgive me, I was a home ec teacher for many years, so I've labeled everything using the same language that she uses in her pattern instructions. And I highly recommend this. When you are new to sewing, reading instructions can be really daunting because they're technically written. But if you go through and you label all your pieces the way they're labeled by the designer, when you read your instructions, you're going to comprehend more, and it's going to be a much smoother process for you. So my pattern had me cut 2 pocket stays, and this is called a bottom, meaning that it's the bottom down, and I'll show you on the blue jeans what piece that actually is. So on the inside of your jeans, it's this. I would call it the pocket, but she calls it the bottom, and that's fine. So when you're working with it, it's the piece that goes on the bottom. Then you have a pocket stay, which is kind of like a facing, and that's going to be sewn to the front, and I'm going to demonstrate that for you. But the first thing you have to do is prepare your pocket bottoms, okay? So to help you kind of see what I'm doing here, that goes after you face this. It's going to go right there. So that's the part of the jean that we're working on. So let's start with the pocket stay bottom. So I'm going to pin these up on my styrofoam. So my sewing studio just got rebuilt, and I'm still waiting to put a design wall behind my machines. Bulletin boards work great too. But I'm going to pin that up so that you can see what I'm working on. So I've got 2 pocket stays. I've got a right and a left. And so I'm preparing the coin pocket version first. So just so you can see how this is going to progress. This will go here. That will go there. So that's what I'm going to work on. And then this piece is going to go here. So on the left, and this is left on your body, it's right what you're looking at. I used my serger. I serged the outside edge. I did not cut anything off. And now I'm just going to sew this piece on to get it ready. I'm using a size 14 jeans needle. I'm using 40 weight Isocord thread, and it's a favorite thread of mine for garment sewing. It's really strong. And for this particular step, I'm just using a regular straight stitch. I've got dual feet engaged, and I'm just top stitching this on. And back stitching. If you pin as you sew, you want your pins to go in perpendicular to what you're doing so you can pull them out of the way. So I'm just going to set this piece right up here to kind of get it out of my way. And again, I wrote with marker on these pieces because I'm using this strictly for instructional purposes. So anyway, I've got my first pocket facing and my pocket stay there. So now I need to prepare the other side. The other side has a coin pocket. So the instructions tell you to fuse a piece of interfacing to the top edge, and then it's further going to instruct you to press this down 3/4 of an inch. And I usually do that with my iron, but I'm going to use this pressing tool right now, just so that I don't have to leave the sewing machine. And I'm going to crease it. This is a Clover product. I love it. And then I'm going to pull that under again. And I'm going to pin this in place or use clips. And actually my preference is clips. Let me get them. Here we go. It's another Clover product. I want to give them credit because, boy, these are awesome. So I'm just going to clip that in place. Now I am going to adjust my sewing machine to a triple stitch. Kind of feel like I'm all thumbs today. I apologize for that. So on my sewing machine right here, I'm sewing on a BERNINA 770. I own a 770, a 790, and a 700 for embroidery work. And the triple stitch is number 6 on this machine. And a triple stitch works like this. It sews forward, backwards, forward, second stitch, backwards, forward, third stitch, backwards, forward. It also allows your fabric to stretch a little bit if needed. But I love this stitch. It's the most beautiful top stitch for denim, and it's a very, very strong stitch. I want to set my length though at 3.5 millimeters. And for those of you that are sewing on a BERNINA, all BERNINAs, even the mechanical, no, not the 1008s, but all BERNINAs starting from the 2 series up have temporary stitch memory. And so as long as my machine stays on, or put in eco mode, it's going to remember that that's the length that I selected. So which is really handy when you get interrupted in the middle of a project. So it's top stitching, therefore I'm stitching from the top. And you can see how it comes forward, then it moves backwards. I always use my hands to make sure that the underside is doing what I want it to do. Be aware of what's going on underneath, okay? Again, usually I would press this. Cut it. And I'm using a gray isocord thread in the bottom, okay? And then I'm going to come and I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch from that. Now, a lot of you may think, why put interfacing in the top there? It keeps this from stretching out of shape, which is actually really important. So you'll notice it's wise to do that in your back pockets also. So the next step is going to tell me to fold this in a 1/2 inch. And then we're going to take this and line it up with the bottom curved edge of the pocket. This is called the pocket facing. And really this should pretty much be parallel there. And I'm just going to use a couple of long flat pins to hold that in place for me. And I'm going to use the same top stitching setup to apply this. Okay, I'm going to show you a little trick. I'm getting ready to go over the 6 layers of fabric, actually 7 layers of fabric right there. So BERNINA's come with a height compensation tool. I don't know if they come with other brands. It's very possible. It's a very inexpensive accessory. So they're pretty easy to buy. If you don't have one of these, you can make your own. So I have leftover belt looping from other jeans that I've made. I hold on to these. The whole point of a height compensation tool is you can raise your presser foot when you're getting ready to navigate over the really high, thick seams, and you want something underneath your presser foot that is the same thickness as your fabric. And what that does is that allows you to have very even pressure on your presser foot. down on your feed dogs. Just pay attention to these triple stitches though, however, because you don't want to sew backwards onto that tool, right? And I'm going to back stitch a little bit. Then I'm going to cut my thread. I'm going to demonstrate the second round using a homemade one. Special tools are fun, but you don't always need them. Raise presser foot. Again, I don't want to sew this old belt loop to my triple stitch either, so just be mindful of that. Do a little back stitching, cut my thread. Okay, you see how my stitches are real smooth here? That's because I added a little bit there. So the logic behind that is that provides a really even platform for my presser foot when it's putting pressure on my fabric, and it provides that really nice pressure over the feed dogs. Okay, so I need to walk over to my serger, so I'm going to have my camera friend here follow me to the serger. And because I love purple and blue and really pretty bright colors, I decided to use a purple thread. I am using a Cerakote in my serger. It's a Metler brand of serger thread. It's also used for long arming. It's a polyester. I love it. It doesn't melt when you iron it. You can't say that about all serger threads. So I'm putting a lot of time into my blue jeans. I don't want my seams to melt away when I press them. The serger is going to give me an opportunity to trim off anything that's uneven. Okay, you see? So now I'm ready to attach this particular one to the pocket stay bottom for the other side. So a little tip, by the way, I don't know if you can see where I have my scissors hanging right here. I keep a little pair of scissors on every sewing machine on my vertical spool pinned. So I'm going to trim that. Then this needs to line up right here. Now in this particular one that I made, this is exactly how I did them for my poppy blue jeans. I was just having a lot of fun with trims, even though nobody can see my polka dot bias trim in there. I know it's there, and I think it's just really fun. I want to caution you about doing things like that though, however, because if it gets too thick, then you're adding a lot of bulkiness to your waistband. This particular denim is lightweight enough that I knew that it would be just fine. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to anchor this down with pins. I normally don't use these long pins while I'm sewing, but they're fantastic for anchoring pockets. And I'm not pulling them out as I sew. They're just going to keep this from moving on me. I'm going to go back to a straight stitch, and I'm going to top stitch this in place. And again, this won't show. You can put a couple of rows of stitches there if you want to. Okay. So you can see now what that looks like. The next thing I would do is press all this. And the reason I would press it is pressing helps your seams, your thread to just literally kind of meld into your fabric. It's just a really good idea to do that. Quilters call that setting your seams. In garment work, we tend to call that melding in. So the next step now is I'm going to set these aside. And I want to face my pockets. So my fronts, we're going to pretend like these go all the way to the ground, right? I just thought it would be easier to demonstrate what I'm doing by cutting smaller samples for you. So I've got a right front and I've got a left front. The instructions will advise you to fuse an interfacing. I'm using a lightweight woven interfacing. The way you pre-shrink interfacing, by the way, is you take it, you fill a bowl with hot tap water, you soak your interfacing in it for 10 minutes, and then you take it out and you wring it out good and you just hang it to dry. And then you cut your pieces and then you fuse them on. I went ahead and took my garment ruler and I with the chalk, with rolling chalk, I went ahead and drew a line in 1 3/4 inches from here. And the reason I did that is because that's my seam, the center front of my jean. So I went ahead and did that in advance. I marked a little dot here that we will need later when we go to put our zipper in. So my fronts are prepared for pockets and a zipper. So we're going to take the pocket stay top. I would have actually called this a facing. This designer calls it a top, which is fine. So I'm going to put this right here. My seam allowances in this particular pattern are 5/8 of an inch. Do not adjust your seam allowances. I want you to think of garments as three-dimensional jigsaw puzzles, okay? And so when you start adjusting your seam allowances, you're changing how the puzzle pieces go together. So don't just adjust seam allowances. Okay, so I'm going to use a regular straight stitch at 2.5 millimeters. So right sides together, 5/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing to my next piece. I'm using an ombre fabric that I just had lying around in my stash here. And so it looks like I'm using a different color on everything, but it was a rainbow ombre that I had. And it's also easier for you to see what I'm doing if I'm using a fabric that's a different color. And I didn't cut that very perfect, so I'm going to rely on my denim seam allowances here. Okay, this next step is pretty important. Let me grab a pair of scissors. Okay, this is going to have to be sewn in when this is turned, right? So I need to clip my curves, and I need to clip them very close to the stitching and close to each other. So for this kind of heavily pronounced curve, I'm clipping a lot. So I'm going to do that on this side too. And then we're going to go over to the ironing board. You know you've clipped enough if you can pull straight. That's kind of your trick, okay? So let's go to the ironing mat. And I will get to show you another one of my favorite tools. I love these wool ironing mats. And then I also like the little miniature irons. This is a steam fast one. So I'm going to turn this. That is some serious orange. and press that. And usually, one thing I did not do, I usually press my seam in first, meld my seam in. So I'm going to press this one too. There we go. Okay, so I am ready to top stitch both of these. So I'm going to head back. I'm going to turn my iron off. Head back to my sewing machine. And this time I'm going to actually use my triple stitch again. And I'm using a clear presser foot so that I can see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to transition to my 1/4 inch foot. When you're applying a triple stitch top stitch, you need to be careful not to play tug of war with your fabric. You need to let your feed dots feed your fabric forward and backwards. I tend to chain my pieces together too. It just saves me a little bit of time. Okay, now I'm going to change my presser foot. So this is a 9mm sewing machine, meaning that the stitches can be up to 9mm wide. Most sewing machines offer a 5.5mm width stitch, and that's why most presser feet are narrower. So I'm going to put my patchwork foot in that is designed for a 9mm wide sewing machine. And the reason I want the width is because this width will provide the pressure I need with my feed dogs, which is really important if you want really high quality stitches. So, and I will go ahead and say, one of the things I love about my Bernina sewing machines are the one-piece presser feet. I can literally install them with one hand, and I love that I don't have to use a screwdriver. So anyway, and this is a dual feed machine, so I'm going to lower my dual feed. Okay, now I'm going to come back and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch from that row of top stitching that I just applied. When people are new to sewing, they find curves a little intimidating. If you just kind of watch, I don't hold my fabric tight at all, and I'm just using my left hand to gently navigate the curve. Okay, so now I have each front with the pocket stay top portion, meaning top portion. I would probably call that more of a facing, but that's okay. So I have that lined up there. I'm going to switch back to a regular stitch right now. And I am now going to apply the stay bottom to the top to get my pieces ready. So I'm going to line my fabric up. And I'm going to actually clip this. So I'm going to bring this over to the serger. And I don't bring pins to the serger, just so you know. So I'm going to do the same thing with this side. I'm going to serge this bottom seam. It's a very strong seam. I think it works great for pockets. I'm going to actually allow myself to trim a little bit off where they're not even. And they're not even largely because I cut it out fast and I'm working with scraps of fabric here. But I'll trim some of that off just to get that even. So if you follow me to my serger, this will be real fast. Again, I'm making sure I'm double checking because if I need to trim a little bit off, I want to do that. I think it's important that you use a really nice quality cotton on your pockets. Avoid polyester. If you can, it pills and it becomes really uncomfortable. It's really scratchy. Another thing you don't want to use is nylon threads. I bought a pair of jeans recently and they used a clear nylon thread on the inside. I couldn't wear them at all. It was like having sandpaper against your body. So just use a really good thread as well. Okay, so now I have my front pieces sewn together and I want to stay stitch the sides and the tops to keep all of this from moving on me as I progress through the rest of the project. So I'm going to pin through the layers. I want that to lay nice and flat. I'm going to do the same thing to both of them. And for stay stitching, you just want regular stitching. I'm just going to do a 1/4 inch from the edge. The seam allowance is going to be 5/8, so this isn't something that will have to come out, but it's going to help it stay in place while I'm working with it. So that's the point of stay stitching. As I come around each corner, I'm pivoting. And when I pivot, my needle is all the way down in the down position and my take-up lever is also down. So if you're using a mechanical machine, make sure your needle is down, raise presser foot, pivot and lower the presser foot. On this machine, I just press a button and my needle's going to stay down. And then when you get to the end, I want my needle in the up position, so I just press this button to get my needle up. My take-up lever needs to be up. If you're working on a mechanical machine, rotate your hand wheel towards you till the take-up lever is up. When the take-up lever is up, your needle is up, and the hook in the bottom is where it needs to be to release the stitch. So if you've ever, this is just a sewing tip, but if you've ever sewn and you end up with three threads coming out of the bottom when you pull your fabric out, it's because the hook hasn't completed the stitch yet. So the way you use your machine is really important. So anyway, that's what this day stitching is going to look like, and I'm going to do that to the next piece. And stay tuned. The next video will focus on how to put the zipper in. Thank you for joining us.